He looked at me with an understanding that caught me off guard. I didn't turn away. I'm Diana, 58 years old, a devoted wife who spent over 3 decades beside Tom. I used to believe peaceful love was enough until that first glance from Alex, my husband's colleague. It lasted only a moment, but it made me question everything I thought I knew about my life. Have you ever felt invisible in your own marriage? And share your story in the comments below. I'd truly love to hear it. If someone had told me that a simple birthday dinner could shake the foundation of a marriage that had lasted over 30 years, I would have smiled politely and shaken my head. But on that fateful evening, as I stepped across the threshold of Alex and Samantha's home, I had no idea that everything was about to change. Not just my emotions, but the way I saw my entire life. My name is Diana. I'm 58 years old. You could say my life has been peaceful, maybe even enviable to some. I live with my husband, Tom, a thoughtful, quiet, dependable man. We have 2 grown children who've long since moved out, and most of my days revolve around tending to the little garden in our backyard, reading old novels, and cooking warm dinners for just the 2 of us. Tom works for an engineering design firm and had been coming home late a lot lately, blaming it on year-end project deadlines. I didn't question it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel alone sometimes, not unloved, just forgotten in the comfort of a love that had become too familiar. Like it was always there, but the spark had quietly burned out. That Friday evening, we were invited to Alex and Samantha's house. Alex is one of Tom's younger colleagues, a promising architect. I'd met them a few times before at company events. Samantha is young, charming, effortlessly graceful, someone who makes everyone feel at ease. And Alex had a way of speaking that felt different. He didn't just talk, he listened. Their home sat in a quiet suburb, warmly lit with soft golden lights and filled with the faint scent of cinnamon in the air. As I walked in, Samantha greeted me with her usual enthusiasm, wrapping me in a hug. "Diana, you're here. You're gonna love dinner tonight," she said, her eyes sparkling like a kid about to show off a new toy. Alex stood nearby, holding a glass of red wine. When I glanced his way, he gave me a small nod and a quiet smile. "Nice to meet you, Deanna. I've heard a lot about you from Tom." His gaze was focused, and for a moment, I felt acknowledged in a way I hadn't in years. Dinner was warm and lively, full of laughter and stories about work, travel, even old memories. Tom spent most of the evening chatting with Samantha. They seemed to click over shared interests like tech and cars. I didn't mind, truly, but at one point, I glanced across the table and caught Alex looking at me. Not with polite curiosity or small talk energy, but with quiet, focused interest. And for a moment, I felt my heart skip a beat. After the meal, Samantha invited me to join her in the kitchen to help clean up, but Alex spoke up first. "I've got it, really. I'm quick with dishes. You two should go relax in the garden." I gently declined and walked out to the porch alone. A few minutes later, Alex came out with 2 steaming cups of herbal tea, placing one on the wooden table beside me. "This garden's beautiful," I said, admiring the twinkle lights strung across the fence. "Not as beautiful as the way you speak," Alex replied, his voice low and steady, no teasing, just sincerity. "You make people feel calm in a way that's rare." I froze for a moment, then smiled small before steering the conversation elsewhere. But inside, something shifted. A breeze doesn't need to howl to wake a sleeping tree. And in that moment, I realized maybe I was the one who'd been asleep all along, inside my marriage. The days following that evening at Alex and Samantha's house passed by seemingly unchanged. Diana still woke early to tend her little backyard garden, made breakfast like she always did, cleaned up and read by the window as sunlight spilled onto the wooden floor. Tom still left for work at the same time, came home right on schedule, and asked his usual questions. "How are you feeling today?" Or "Want to go somewhere this weekend?" But Diana felt something shifting, not in Tom, but within herself. Something about Alex's presence stayed with her. The way he had looked at her with quiet depth as they stood among the roses beneath the moonlight, her heart would skip. It wasn't physical, but it opened a quiet space inside her, one she didn't know existed. Of the life she once believed was whole. Tom didn't seem to notice anything different. He was still attentive, but in a way, Deanna was beginning to see as mechanical. She had never noticed it so clearly before. His hugs followed a script. His kisses no longer made her heart flutter like they once did. And the scariest part? The quiet realization. Maybe the love was still there, but the connection had faded. One late afternoon, as she was curled up in her armchair reading, her phone buzzed softly. A message from Alex. I hope the other night didn't make you uncomfortable. I keep thinking about the things I didn't get to say. Diana hesitated, then typed a short, honest reply. It didn't. It just made me think more than I expected. That message was like unlocking a door neither of them had named. From that day on, they texted more often. About books, about gardens, about the small, simple things that somehow felt more real. There were no inappropriate words, no declarations of longing, just an emotional closeness that crept in like light under a closed door. One day, Alex wrote, "Tom's lucky to have a woman like you." Diana froze, not because of the compliment, but because no one had said something like that to her in years. No one had seen her as more than just a background figure in a family portrait, a woman whole enough to be recognized, separate from the roles she played. The truth was, she began to feel Alex's presence in the smallest parts of her day. When she cooked dinner and thought about the way he told stories, witty and effortless. When she watered the flowers and remembered how he had cradled a wilted stem as if it were something precious. Those thoughts made her smile, then immediately feel guilty. Tom hadn't done anything wrong, and somehow that made everything more complicated. Because if your husband still loves you, still shows up, still doesn't betray you, why do you feel so unbearably alone? And why can one glance from someone else, one simple message, send your heart into a tailspin? One night, long after Tom had fallen asleep, Diana sat by the window, looking out at the quiet garden glowing under the porch light. She picked up her phone, typed a few words, deleted them. Typed again, deleted, over and over. Finally, she sent just one line. Do you think two truths can exist in the same heart? Not long after, Alex replied, I think that's what makes us human, and sometimes the point isn't choosing one over the other, it's understanding why both are there. Deanna read that response over and over again, feeling a soft, aching kind of pain. Not from guilt, but from truth. A truth she could no longer deny. That she had started to see herself in a new mirror. Not distorted, not perfect, but realer than she'd felt in years. In the days that followed, Deanna tried to return to her old rhythm. Simple breakfasts with Tom, quiet afternoons in the garden, and evenings spent watching the news together. But in each of those routines, she felt like she was performing the role of herself. She still spoke, still smiled, still sat beside her husband just as she always had, but her mind drifted, quietly, inevitably, back to those last messages with Alec. I think sometimes the point of truth isn't choosing one and abandoning the other. It's understanding why we carry both. That line repeated in her mind like a whisper she couldn't shake. Alex hadn't messaged again after that night. And somehow it was that silence that unsettled her most. Without those short, warm exchanges, she realized she missed a connection that reminded her of the person she used to be. That afternoon, while Tom was working in the study, the doorbell rang. Deanna went to answer it, and as if fate had a cruel sense of timing, there stood Alex. He wore a pale gray shirt, his hair tousled slightly by the wind, his eyes quiet but deep, as if holding back a question he didn't know how to ask. Sorry for dropping by unannounced, he said gently, but I brought you a gardening book, thought you might like it. Dinah stared at the book in his hands, her heart pounding. Not because of the book, but because of the way he said you. Softly, effortlessly, like it belonged. Tom's home, she said almost in a whisper, a warning, or maybe a reminder to herself. Alex nodded. I know, I'll just leave it and go. As she reached for the book, her fingers brushed his. Their eyes met briefly. It was a quiet reminder of all the questions left unasked. When Alex turned to leave, she didn't call him back. But her heart didn't let go. That night, when Tom asked, "How was your day?" Deanna simply answered, "Peaceful." But deep down, she knew a storm was brewing. A storm of long suppressed feelings, of things that couldn't quite be named as betrayal, but couldn't be dismissed as harmless either. She opened the book Alex had given her. Tucked between the first pages was a small note. Some plants only bloom when no one's watching. But that doesn't mean they're not beautiful. Diana closed the book slowly, her chest tightening in the quiet. Maybe she was one of those plants. And maybe for the first time in 30 years, she wasn't so sure she could keep blooming under the same sun. The next morning, when Diana woke up, Tom had already left for work. On the kitchen table was a familiar note in his neat handwriting. "Working late, executive meeting tonight." The same words, the same careful penmanship, and yet, for some reason, it felt emptier than usual today. She brought the book Alex had given her out to the garden and sat on the old wooden bench nestled between the blooming lavender. The book lay open in her lap, but her eyes couldn't follow a single line. Alex's words from the note still echoed clearly in her mind. Some plants only bloom when no one's watching. Diana let out a soft sigh. She used to think of herself as a happy woman, and at one point she truly had been. But now, sitting in the garden she had lovingly tended, in the peaceful home so many would envy, she felt like a faded silhouette, blurred by the very life she had built. That evening, Tom did come home late. He looked tired, but still alert enough to notice something in the way Diana avoided his gaze. He sat down slowly, then asked, "You okay?" Deanna pressed her lips together, then nodded. "Yeah, just a little tired." Tom didn't push. He was used to Diana keeping her feelings guarded, but this time something felt different. Something was shifting, and he sensed he might be the last to notice. After dinner, as they cleaned up together in silence, Tom suddenly asked, "The other day I saw Alex stop by. Was something going on?" Diana's hands froze over the porcelain dish. She set it down in the sink, dried her hands gently, and turned to face him. "He just brought me a book about gardening, that's all." Tom looked at her for a long moment. His eyes searched hers, not with anger, but with a kind of quiet unease, a discomfort he hadn't felt before. "Diana," he said, his voice low and rough with exhaustion, "if there's something you want to talk about, I hope you won't keep it from me." She smiled faintly, tired and soft. "I'm not hiding anything, Tom." But as he turned away, she watched his back with a sharp ache in her chest. She hadn't lied, but she hadn't been fully honest either. Because how could she explain that a single look from Alex had made her heart skip a beat? That one small note had stirred questions about a marriage she once believed was as solid as oak? Diana retreated into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. In the darkened room, she let herself face the truth for the first time. She wasn't just tired. She was slowly losing herself. And somehow, in the quietest way, Alex had called her back. 3 days after the night Tom asked about Alex, Diana still hadn't found peace within herself. She wandered through the garden and sat down on the stone bench beneath the old plum tree, the same spot where she used to write her first journal entries after moving here with Tom. Back then, just his smile was enough to make her feel complete. But time passes, and some things can't be held onto with memory alone. That afternoon, Tom came home earlier than usual. He stepped into the kitchen and saw Deanna sitting at the dining table, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of cold tea. The room was silent, as if even the walls were bracing for something about to break. "Tom," she began, her voice low and trembling, "I need to talk to you." He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, saying nothing, just nodding. There was something in Deanna's eyes that made him pause, something that cut through all the assumptions, all the quiet pride of a man who had long believed in stability. "Do you remember when you asked me about Alex?" she said, not waiting for a reply. "The truth is, it wasn't just about the book. We've talked more since then, not about gardening, but about me. About how I feel like I've stopped being seen." Tom's hands clenched on the table, not from jealousy, but from shock. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly. Diana took a deep breath. Nothing happened between us. There was no affair, no lines crossed, but I can't deny he made me realize that somewhere along the way, I disappeared in our marriage. She braced herself for anger, for accusation, but instead, Tom simply looked at her for 1 minute, then another. I know, he finally whispered. I've felt you slipping away. I just didn't know how to reach for you. His admission broke something open in her. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was scared, he replied, his voice rough. Scared that if I asked, you'd tell me you don't love me anymore. Diana reached across the table and took his hand. For the first time in weeks, I still love you, Tom, but I'm also trying to love myself again. And I can't do that if we keep pretending everything's fine. The silence between them now wasn't distance, it was a bridge. I'm ready to listen, Tom said softly. Really listen. Even if what you say hurts. Diana gave a faint smile. Then let's start over. But this time from both of us. And on that very afternoon, with the lavender trembling in the first winds of the new season, they began to relearn how to be husband and wife, like two strangers slowly finding their way back home to each other. After that conversation, Diana and Tom began rebuilding their marriage as if they were old friends, finding their way back to a bond they'd once misplaced. Nothing became perfect overnight, because it never really works that way. But they started learning how to speak the truths they used to keep hidden. More importantly, they learned how to listen without rushing to defend or fix. Diana began journaling again, not to pour out sadness, but to capture the small moments. A morning cup of tea that Tom made without needing to ask her preferences. A quiet hug after dinner. Or the way his eyes followed her as she tended the garden in silence. These little things, once so easy to overlook, had become the glue slowly binding them back together. One quiet Sunday afternoon, as Diana was reorganizing the bookshelf in their study, Tom walked in holding a pale green book, the one Alex had given her. He handed it to her without accusation, without anger. I read a few pages, he said calmly. I understand now why what he wrote resonated with you. I understand because I forgot somewhere along the way that you're not just my wife. You're a woman who deserves to be seen and heard. Diana took the book, looking up at him. Thank you, she said gently, for not treating me like something someone else tried to take. Tom smiled, an old, familiar smile, but genuine. Love isn't ownership, is it? It's letting someone be free, and if they stay, it's because they choose to stay. Not out of duty, but because they want to. That night, they sat together on the porch, gazing up at the clear autumn sky. Diana rested her head on Tom's shoulder, her heart feeling light, as if it had never carried the weight of unspoken things. She chose to stay grounded in the life she built, one that still had space for growth, and love wasn't a fleeting romance, but a love that could grow with her. Alex, in the end, had been a mirror, reflecting the parts of herself she had let fall asleep. He reminded her who she was and gave her the courage to ask for more from the life she already had. And Tom, the man who once believed love was steady silence, had learned to love with understanding and openness. They were no longer husband and wife just because they had made a promise. They were still choosing each other every single day. Healing, after all, isn't about going back in time. It's about moving forward with your hands still holding on. And this time they truly move forward together. Diana's story isn't a perfect love song. It's a symphony of low notes, quiet fractures, deep longing, and the courage to finally say what was once left unsaid. Between the lines of right and wrong, heart and reason, she didn't choose to run. She chose to face it. Because marriage isn't a place to hide from complicated emotions. It's a place to heal together, to grow together, and to choose each other all over again, every single day. What do you think about Diana's choice? Have you ever found yourself swept up in emotions you didn't expect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone out there feel seen and understood. And if you love heartfelt stories about love, marriage, and rediscovering yourself, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. We're here to tell stories, and you're here to feel and connect.